Hi, folks, and welcome. I'm Meg Jakubowski. I'm the National Director of Education for NatureBridge. I am so pleased to be welcoming you all to tonight's Campfire with Vera Michalchik and Wade Davis. I'd like to share just a couple of housekeeping items to make sure that this will run smoothly for everyone. So firstly, chat will be enabled for this event, and this event is being recorded. If you have any technical issues, please go ahead and put them into chat. If you have any questions, there is a question and answer Q&A function at the bottom of your screen that we ask you to use, which allows you to ask questions and then also thumbs up them for Vera and Wade. We'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the very end of our session. So on behalf of NatureBridge, I want to thank you all for joining us and to let you know that our mission at NatureBridge is to connect young people to the wonder and science of the natural world, igniting self-discovery and inspiring stewardship of our planet. And at our programs, kids spend over 8 hours outside learning and exploring every single day. And today's conversation centers around how today's kids might end up being the first indoor generation. So let's run a quick poll, and hopefully everyone's familiar with how to do that. It should pop up for you in just a few seconds, and you can go ahead and respond. So our question is, just an estimate, pre-pandemic, on average, how much time do kids spend outside every day? Is it 1 hour, less than 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 3 hours, or over 5 hours? So take a second to wager your guess. Pre-pandemic, how much time do kids spend outside every day? I think we'll bring the poll to a close. All right, we have most folks thought about an hour, and unfortunately, those of you that voted for less than 10 minutes, you are correct. Since 1971, NatureBridge has been working to reverse that trend. And as many of you know, we at NatureBridge this year are celebrating our 50th anniversary. And so we really want to give a special thanks to all of our partners that are helping us to celebrate this year. Speaking of which, I would really love to invite Stephanie Teddy, who is the Vice President and Head of Strategic Philanthropy at Bank of the West, who was one of our 50th anniversary sponsors, to take a moment to open our event with just a few words. Stephanie?
Good evening, and thank you so much, Meg, and all of the NatureBridge team for welcoming Bank of the West to this event. I have the privilege of leading our strategic philanthropy programs across our 20-state footprint, and I'm very excited to be here at the 50th anniversary Campfire Chat, as well as having the privilege to introduce the esteemed guest speaker, Wade Davis. But first, I would like to share with you a little bit about Bank of the West and how we came to partner with such an impactful organization like NatureBridge. Bank of the West originally launched its partnership with NatureBridge in 2003 to explore new and innovative ways we could help support youth-centered organizations tied to environmental activation. What I love about this organization is its connection to not only the environment, but also science, and how students have the ability to experience a hands-on approach to learning. So super cool. For Bank of the West, we have made large commitments to sustainability, diversity, and community impact. From climate action and resilience to financial health and well-being, to fostering social entrepreneurs, building businesses that address our most pressing sustainability challenges, each of us have a role to play. And I'm proud to be part of the team that's driving this positive impact. At Bank of the West, we are a fundamentally different bank. We believe banks have a critical role to play in both social and environmental sustainability to build a thriving economy and inclusive society. We are a regional bank with a global purview as part of BNP Paribas Group. We have the strongest environmental stance of any major US bank. We have prohibited the financing of drilling in the Arctic and oil and gas from shale and tar sands, big tobacco, and other harmful practices. And we're investing in the transition to clean, renewable energy. In fact, Earlier this year, we reached our goal to finance $1 billion in clean renewable energy projects 2 years ahead of schedule. We are one of the best places to work for LGBTQ equality and one of the best employers for women, and are supporting women entrepreneurs living in poverty through our partnership with Green America. We're so honored to partner with an amazing organization like NatureBridge. Tonight, it's my great honor to introduce our host, Dr. Vera Michalchik. Vera is NatureBridge's Vice Chair of Education and is the Associate Director of the Connected Learning Lab at UC Irvine. Vera?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Meg, and thank you, Stephanie. That was a wonderful introduction to your relationship, your long relationship with NatureBridge. And I get the honor and privilege of introducing tonight's guest, Professor Wade Davis. He's at the University of British Columbia in the Department of Anthropology, and he's the chair of cultures and ecosystems at risk at the university there. Before joining the University of British Columbia, he was the explorer in residence at the National Geographic Society for 13 years, from 2000 to 2013. And he's the author of 23 books that have been translated into many languages and sold hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of copies. He's a member of the Order of Canada, which is the highest civilian award, and recently was made an honorary citizen of the nation of Colombia. I also know from my snooping around that he is an artist, he's a scientist, and most of all, he identifies as a storyteller, which is maybe one of the longest standing and most important roles in our society as we live out the stories and dreams we have for making the world the place we want it to be. Wade, I want to turn it over to you and have you just acknowledge your presence.
Oh, hi, Vera. I was so touched by Meg's comments, and Stephanie, you made me want to transfer all my assets, the limited assets I have, to the Bank of the West. You know, what a wonderful thing we're doing tonight, bringing together, so many different sort of efforts to address this question. Our children, and where are they going to live, how are they going to live, and how are they going to experience the natural world? And I'm just really honored to be here. You know, I think kids want to be outside. I don't think it's their fault that they're not outside when we see some of these stunning statistics. I don't think it's the fault of the families. I think it's kind of a dearth of opportunities created by various circumstances that we might be able to explore tonight. I know by being a dad that kids love to be in the wild. And what we really need to focus on is giving them the chances to be there. You know, it's so interesting. I was born a Canadian, but I chose to be an American, and I love the United States. And the United States has just passed a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that's going to, do so much, including, infusing Amtrak, the railroad system that's probably of another era, with huge amounts of money. And God bless them for doing it. And let's see if Amtrak can make an important contribution to the future of the United States. But I'll tell you this, I'd rather put my money in the kids. And I like to see where the money from the infrastructure is that will allow every child in America, from urban and rural areas, from north and south, from every conceivable ethnicity, that makes up the wonder of what the United States is, the promise, the dream of America, what it is. I like to see if the infrastructure bill couldn't get every one of those kids into the wild.
That's such a beautiful opening, and I'm going to piggyback right on that. And as you noted, this is, as everybody has noted, this particular evening, this chat is billed as exploring potentially the first indoor generation ever. And I want to ask you a question, maybe you've never been asked this way. What's the difference between indoors and outdoors? What does it mean to be outdoors?
Well, to be outdoors is to feel the rhythm of the wild. It's to hear the whispered messages of the landscape. It's to sense in the shadow on the ground a tree that once stood before you. It's that kind of atavistic instinctual thing that humans have to create a spirit of place. I mean, landscape creates character, culture springs from a spirit of place. You know, all of human civilization has been based about loyalty to land. And if we eviscerate that, if we sanitize that, if we deny our children the opportunity to feel those ancient rhythms, we'll do a disservice to both our kids and the world at large. You know, I try not to blame people. I don't believe in enemies. I only believe in solutions. And, you know, it's easy enough to say that in my generation, for example, Vera, we were always outside. We were. I mean, I grew up in Montreal. I took my skates to school. I came home from school at 3 o'clock. I never went home. I went to the rink and I skated till my dad dragged me off at 7. But there were no distractions in home. I mean, television, we had 3 black and white channels that kind of garbled away with things we didn't care about. You know, the outdoors was where we lived, and we lived in communities which really were communities where every kid could almost go into every door and be welcomed by not necessarily a family member, but someone in the community that had their own kids that were knocking at the door of your mom as you are knocking at the door of their, you know, family. I mean, it was that sense that communities really counted. And so there was this kind of thing where as kids, we weren't shackled by fear. You know, it's so interesting. I mean, this idea that the media has generated that we should be fearful of everything, that our kids at 3 should wear helmets on their tricycles, that Halloween is a demonic thing that we need to escort our kids to the doors, when in fact, in the all history of Halloween, only a couple of kids have ever suffered, and they've suffered at the hands of their own parents. I mean, or that we have kids kidnap victims on the sides of milk cartons in the dairy section. The media has kind of created the sense that we need to be more fearful than we are. And the one thing that I was fortunate was to grow up in a world when we didn't really fear. You know, I went to school in Montreal where my mom sent me off at 11 on this kind of odyssey every day by bus and train and on foot to get to my school. And no one ever thought that that was a dangerous thing to do. And I think part of what we need to do is sort of lighten up, you know, and realize that our kids are tough and give them a chance to be in the wild. And again, this is not a simple thing. You know, it has to be structured. I mean, I recently did, Vera, a benefit for Outward Bound in Canada. And I work very hard with organizations that support kids getting into the wild. And, you know, if we really cared about the future of our countries, Canada and the US, and if we really cared about our young people, it's not complicated. We could find structures whereby they had opportunities to go into the wild, to work in our parks, to clean up our beaches, to go into the inner cities and help people, a kind of a sense of something bigger than self. You know, part of the whole social media thing has been to create an obsession with self. And that's the one distinction I think that I could strongly suggest exists between the world I grew up in, where the whole value, not that any of us were perfect, but the idea was you serve something other than self. And now it seems to me social media seems to be all about self. And that's something we need to break, because what we need is everybody coming together for the benefit of the collective, the benefit of the community, the benefit for the country. And I promise you, the thing is, kids want this. Kids don't want to be in front of those laptops. They don't want to be on their phones all the time. It's kind of what they know. It's what they know. So it's what they want to do. But believe you me, take a kid to the Mackenzie Delta in the Arctic, take them out in the forests of Colorado, you know, show them the beaches of Baja California, you know, take them into the wild and show them the wonder of nature. Every great scientist starts as a bug collector. You know, turn over those rocks, reveal to them the wonder of photosynthesis, tell them about the glory of geology. And believe me, those kids will be just absolutely enchanted. It's not the fault of the kids. The kids want this. We as adults need to create the opportunities in which they can have the possibility of realizing their dreams that they may not even know about, as they're spending famously the 12 hours a day on their smartphones.
It's very inspiring to hear you talk about something greater than self, and talk about the natural world, and talk about service, all of those things in one breath. And in my mind and in my heart, those things go together. That that really an act of service and a posture of service is actually far more gratifying and brings far more happiness than direct attempts to please oneself and such. And this connection to the natural world obviously can play into that in so many ways. I want to hear from you, who has traveled all the world over. You've been with indigenous communities on maybe 5 different continents, maybe 6, I'm not sure. Where you lost yourself to the greater, to the bigger, to the more wild and wonderful, where the natural world became re-enchanted for you, and how you experienced that as an adult.
Well, the thing is, Vera, I never lost it, because I grew up in British Columbia from a modest family. I was able to, at the age of 15, join a program we had in our provincial parks, which brought together kids from every socioeconomic strata, from every part of the province, and flung them into provincial parks to work, to cut trail, to fight fires. And, for me, that began the process of kind of almost initiation, which is something that's lacking in our society, where, young boys and young girls go out and find mentors who are tough on them, who are difficult, who demand things of them, but make the kids bigger than they are. This is a whole thing, make kids understand that creativity is not an innate thing, that it's a consequence of action. It's not the motivation of action, it's a consequence of action. Do what needs to be done, and then ask whether it was possible or permissible. And so I was really fortunate to be of a generation that had those opportunities. I could work as a firefighter, I could work as a logger, I could work as a honey guide, I could work as a park ranger, and just the daily challenge of making enough money to help my family, or to get myself into college, or all that stuff actually drew me into the wild. So I grew up in it, so it was never separate from me, but that doesn't mean that I was lucky to have those opportunities. But what the question is, how can we give other children everywhere that kind of opportunity? A friend of mine, one of the greatest sort of environmental activists in the history of Canada, Paul George, head of what was called the Western Canada Wilderness Committee, I once asked him, what do we need to do to really get people to want to respect and honor the earth, if you will? And he said, get them into it, get them to experience it. And so programs like NatureBridge are not, they're not trivial. They're absolutely essential. Look at the montage of images that open the show with Meg, look at the faces, the radiant faces of those kids around the redwoods, kids of every ethnicity, if you noticed. Every kid loves to be a bug collector. Every kid would love to be a botanist. Every kid would love to know the glory of what the formula of photosynthesis implies. We just have to give them the opportunity. And I think that's where this evening is so important, is that we're celebrating an organization that has now 50 years of doing exactly that. And this is what we need to do. Get the kids into the wild, and the wild will take care of everything.
It's beautiful. What I hear you saying, let me know if I'm revoicing this in a way, that we've been in this short and narrow sliver of time when we've been separated from the wild, separated from the mystery and the majesty of what happens out there, whether the mystery is photosynthesis or whether it's the colors shifting on the mountain as the sun's setting. And so we've got this peculiar time, this peculiar moment in history, and we're trying to get back to something. That's something you've seen in other cultures, you've seen in other places, you've seen peoples who've never disconnected. And we're in a situation where at large, not you personally, and I really appreciate that, but at large, we've had something of a disconnect.
Well, all cultures are myopic, faithful to their own interpretation of reality, and we in the West have a particular intellectual lineage whereby during the Enlightenment in particular, as we tried to liberate ourselves from the tyranny of absolute faith, we threw out all notions of myth, magic, mysticism, and metaphor. We de-animated the world when Descartes said that all that exists is mind and matter. As Saul Bellow said, science has made a house cleaning of belief. And the idea that a bird's flight could have meaning was ridiculed. And the whole kind of existence became a stage set upon which only the human drama unfolded. Plants and animals were but props in that human drama. That was the way we came to think of the world. Now, in liberating yourselves from the tyranny of absolute faith, the individual from the community, the sociological equivalent of splitting the atom, we achieved great personal freedom. And we also birthed the scientific method, which is a great thing. It's just saved us from COVID. Don't get me wrong. I'm not denigrating anything. But at the same time, in de-animated in the world, we came to see it in a certain way. I was raised to believe, Vera, that a mountain was a pile of rock ready to be mined. A forest was board feet and cellulose ready to be cut. Now, that made me fundamentally different than my godchildren in Peru, my Aijalos, who believe that a mountain is a deity that will direct their destiny, or my friends amongst the Kwakwakwa, who believe that the forests of the Pacific Northwest are the abode of Hukuk and the crooked beak of heaven, and the cannibal spirits that will be embraced during the Hamadsa initiation. Now, the issue isn't who's right and who's wrong. Is a mountain rock? Is it a spirit? The interesting thing is how the metaphor, the belief system, mediates the interaction between a particular culture and that landmark with profoundly different consequences for the ecological footprint. The way I think about the world has resulted in mountains being torn down and forests torn asunder. And most cultures around the world don't have this extractive model. Most cultures around, dominant as that extractive model may be, ubiquitous as it may be, it's not the norm, it's the anomaly. And most cultures relate to the world through a metaphor of reciprocity. The earth owes its bounty to humans, but humans in turn owe their fidelity to the earth. That changes the whole dynamic. And so a mountain becomes a deity, and you relate to it in that particular way. Now, the issue isn't who's right and who's wrong, but what is the consequence of the belief system? And somehow we have to get back to a more reciprocal way of interacting with the world. Climate change, for example, has become a global issue. It wasn't caused by a problem for humanity. It wasn't caused by humanity. It was caused by a narrow subset of humanity that for 300 years has stolen and consumed the ancient sunlight of the world. And so, when I am often asked as an anthropologist, why do these multiple voices of humanity, these different visions of life itself matter? I always respond with two words, climate change, not to suggest that we should go back to a pre-industrial past, but rather to suggest that the very existence of these other ways of being, these other ways of thinking, put the lie to those of us in our own culture who say that we cannot change, as we all know we must change the fundamental way in which we inhabit the planet. And we're going in that direction. And one way of doing that is to bring our children into the miraculous face of the wild, to let them know the glory of the world in which they were born. The lesson of COVID, that we are biological beings on a biological planet, that a single pathogen 10,000 times smaller than a grain of salt commandeered our biology and also shattered the bonds of connectivity and community that create a social species. If COVID didn't finally teach us that we're biological beings sharing a planet with other sentient creatures, what more do we need to experience to know that? It's like the vision of the Earth from space from Apollo on Christmas Eve of 1968. We suddenly saw we were not a limitless horizon. We were a blue marble of a planet floating, as the astronaut said, in the velvet void of space. So part of what we have to do is reinvigorate the wonder of nature with children by making their education founded in a way in biological sensitivity. I mean, forget about learning to recite the elements of the Constitution or the oath of allegiance to a flag. How about learning, teaching children to know the formula of photosynthesis, the incredible verse of life, the miracle of life that allows carbon dioxide and water sparked by photons of light to transform into the air we breathe and the food we eat, carbohydrates. I mean, that is the formula of life. I've always said that no person should be able to run for office who doesn't know that formula, because that is what makes life possible. And the minute you tell kids that, their eyes brighten with wonder. You tell a kid in the forest in the Northwest, that every time they step on the floor of the forest, they're stepping on 600 miles of mycelial filaments that not only create the nutrient regime of the forest, but allow mother trees to communicate with children. I mean, and the kids just go, whoa, I'm ready for that. The adults might not be ready for that. The kids are always ready for that. Kids are always ready for the miracle of nature. Their eyes are like, those of sages, wide open to wonder. They just want the opportunity to be given a chance to see.
Wow. And the image of them having that encounter and experiencing the embodied sense of self in relation to the embodied aspect of the planet that they don't normally interact with it's giving me goosebumps. And so what I want to ask you is this: just imagine, just thought experiment that kids from our inner cities, kids from rundown rural communities where they don't get out past the town limits, kids from all sorts of strip center, barren suburbs, overbuilt. They're reconnecting. They are connecting in ways that they haven't. And what starts to happen? What starts to become?
Well, the first thing we have to do, the big problem of our secular society, in a way, amongst other problems, is that we don't have initiation rites. We don't have moments. Almost every culture in the world has a moment when it says to a young boy or girl, childhood is over. And those moments, those transitions are always difficult. They're often exceedingly painful ordeals, physical exposure, and sometimes incredibly painful, because the message has to be clear. You are no longer at 16, you are no longer a child, you are a man or a woman. And now, as we are dying, the elders, we are saying that it's up to you to take over. And so what you're taking over is nothing trivial. You are taking over the core of our culture, of our civilization. Our ability to survive as a people is now in your hands. That's what initiation represents. And every kid given that opportunity recognizes it. The problem is we don't give children that opportunity. And every kid I've ever taken into the wild, and I used to run programs like this, I don't care if they come from the inner city or the affluent suburbs. The first thing you do is you strip them naked. You get rid of all that fluff. You get rid of all the stuff that allowed them to think that they were whatever they were, either a persecuted person of color or a dominant person of privilege. You just rip that from them and leave them naked in the wild, not literally, not in an abusive way, but you take them into a realm beyond their imaginings. Instead, you take kids from the city, the country, wherever they've come from, and you suddenly say, there's a mountain up there. I want to know if you can climb it. And this is what we're going to do, and you climb that mountain, and we're going to go down to the other valley, and there's a river we're going to go down, and there are going to be rapids that are going to scare the hell out of you. And once we get through the rapids, there's going to be a swamp that you got to walk through up to your neck. And as we get to the other side, there's going to be wild creatures to fear, grizzly bears, jaguars, whatever it is. And you know what? And we're going to see if you can make it. And of course, do you think those kids are going to cling to the crap of their teenage backgrounds? No, They say, this is my moment. This is my chance. This is my opportunity to say that I'm not a prisoner of my past. I'm not a victim of anything. I am a soaring, stellar, star of destiny, and I am going to show that I can make it. That's what initiation rites are. And that's what we should, there's no reason in this country, United States, if we can pass a $1 trillion infrastructure bill that throws away $60 billion at Amtrak, and you know where that's going to go, right into the toilet. Why can't we put that money into our children? Real infrastructure construction that will cross parties, every mother, every father, Republican, Democrat, I don't care where you are in the political spectrum. Blow open the political spectrum. Get these kids away from that. Put them on the land, the sacred land of America, and take them into places where nothing before them, behind them counts. All that counts is their destiny. Then you would create a new cadre of incredibly inspired, confident, transcendently engaged, young Americans and Canadians. That's what a program like NatureBridge, that's the promise of it.
And there would be no enemies. There would only be solutions.
There's no enemies, only solutions. I've run these programs. I've seen kids, I've seen in these wild programs we used to run in British Columbia in the parks, absolutely every summer something would explode. Some kid from the city would pick a fight with some kid from the suburbs, and it would blow up, and we'd always let it blow up. We'd make sure no kid got hurt, but we let it out so that we could then deconstruct it, talk to the kids about it. What was this about? And at the end of the day, it was just amazing kind of loving solidarity. Kids don't want to look at their damn laptops 12 hours a day. What could be more boring? They don't want to look at these damn phones. It's all they've got. It's because it's all they've been given, right? It's up to us as adults. It's not their fault. It's like the crazy thing of a convocation or a commencement speech or speaker who goes to a college and starts his conventional speech by saying, the world's a mess, it's up to you to fix it, to a group. That's nonsense. It's not up to them to fix it. They didn't make the problem. We made the problem. Liberate the kids to find their own destiny. Don't lay our problems on them. And so this is the thing. You get a child into the wild in the right program, and not only will they discover the wonder of nature, they'll understand the essence of service. You talk about service, Americans always talking about the service of the military, and God bless them. My own son-in-law is a Navy SEAL. I know the meaning of service from the military, but why should service be limited to the military? Every kid in America who comes of age should do service for his country. If the real antidote to Facebook and Instagram and TikTok isn't getting them off the machines, it's getting them to understand something bigger than self, to abandon the conceit of self-absorption and discover that there's a world beyond themselves that they can serve. And in serving that world, they will become bigger as individuals. And so every kid should be given an opportunity to serve their country, to serve the elderly, to serve the promise of tomorrow. And that can be done so readily if we only had the will. And that's, again, why NatureBridge is a model for how that can be done. And that's why we should be supporting what this institution has been trying to do for 50 years.
That is so powerful and inspiring. I think it's time for us to shift to audience questions. I think we could do this forever because there's so much wisdom and depth in what you've had to offer, Wade, and yet I know that there are some questions lined up. Let's have Meg field a few of them, if we may. Thank you again so much.
My pleasure.
Wade, I have a whole page of notes of the eloquence that's come out of your mouth, and just the kids are always ready for the miracle of nature. They just want the opportunity for a chance to see, and that will resonate with me. And I think that's very much what NatureBridge does. And we have a question that actually kind of relates to that. So I believe it is Julia Smith, asks, what is there to offer to parents or adults who have lost or who have never known the miracle of nature that they might support their children in this type of exploration?
That's a really, actually, really wise question, Meg, because, part of it is, what do we, when I, for example, referred to indigenous societies and initiation rites, those initiation rites are kind of lineages of connectivity, right? That are never broken. You know, you know, and by the way, these indigenous societies, they don't speak in metaphor. The Barasana and the Makuna of the Northwest Amazon, their most profound cultural insight, in a way, is that plants and animals are just people in another dimension of reality. The elder brothers of the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta of Colombia, the Arahuacos, the Kogi, the Wiwa, and the Cancuano, they literally believe that their prayers maintain the cosmic balance of the world. When we look at the Aborigines of Australia, when the British arrived there, they saw a people that looked strange, had a simple technology, but what offended the British is that the Aboriginal people had no interest in improving upon their material lot. And the British, in their inimitable way, concluded they weren't people at all, and they began to shoot them. And as recently as 1902, it was debated in Melbourne as to whether or not Aboriginal people were even human or not. And of course, what the British didn't understand was a subtle devotional philosophy, the dreaming, in which the purpose of life was not to change life, but the ethos was stasis. The whole purpose of life was to do nothing to change the world, but only the rituals that would maintain the world as it was at the time of creation. It would be like as if all of Western intellectual thought went into pruning the shrubs in the Garden of Eden to keep it just as it was when Adam and Eve had their conversation. And of course, the interesting question that comes out of that is, it's not who's right and who's wrong. Had we followed that devotional philosophy, we wouldn't have reached the moon or developed allopathic medicine. But on the other hand, we wouldn't be talking, if we had followed the trajectory of the Aboriginal people, we wouldn't be talking about climate change and our capacity to change the whole biophysical foundation of life. But the question from the mother, I think, that is so brilliant is like, what do you do when this lineage of knowledge is broken? Well, the answer is very simple: reinvent it. Culture is not static. We don't preserve cultures, we preserve jam. Every culture everywhere is always dancing with new possibilities of life, which means that we are perfectly capable of reinventing the terms of reference of our own society. Look, Meg, in my lifetime, women have gone from the kitchen to the boardroom, people of color from the woodshed to the White House, gay people from the closet to the altar. We are always dancing with new possibilities for life, so we can reinvent these connections. So even if that sweet mother who asked that question is saying, what can I do? Because I was kind of abandoned. I was cut off from the connection to nature. And I say, bless you for it. But let's find a way to get both you and your children get back to it. And it's not that, the reason I have such faith in the ability is I almost lost it. It's funny, man. As I said, I grew up in the wild. I was a hunter. I was a park ranger. I was a wilderness guide. I was a logger. I grew up in the rough edge of British Columbia. But I never correlated my love of the wild with the study of biology, because biology for me as a high school student was just sort of, pickled rats and formaldehyde and white frocked laboratory technicians that just drove me crazy. And only by chance in my third year of university did I discover, simply because I went to the Amazon, the wonder of plants. And suddenly the world of the forest became not just a place of green, but a place where every plant had a lineage, a phylogenetic past. Everyone had a name, everyone had a story. And I came back and I just, although I'd never taken a course in biology in my life, I came back from the Amazon after 2 years, and I took a summer course at Harvard in botany. And I have to tell you, Meg, I was the only student in the history of Harvard ever thrown out of the science library by the security for disturbing the peace on the night that I understood the meaning of the formula of photosynthesis. I went absolutely wild, psychotically wild. I ran around to every chair, interrupted every student, and screamed at them. Do you realize what this is? Plants can eat light. Plants can eat light. I was psychotic in joy, in curiosity, in wonder, and part of that was my realization that I hadn't missed it. You know, that I had somehow found my way to biology, and that the lessons of biology were going to inform my life for the rest of that life. And that's what, in fact, they have done. But you see, we need to have every kid, boy or girl, given the opportunity to have that moment of epiphany, that moment when maybe they see a bird on the flight, maybe they see, you know, a creature beneath the ground, maybe they see mycelial mats creating the fungal fluorescence of the forest. Whatever, give every kid the chance to have the epiphany, the encounter, the embrace, the love of the miracle of life itself.
Do we have time for one more question, Meg? Or okay.
I think we do, and we have so many great ones. So I'm curious. There's one you have talked pretty passionately about the climate crisis, and Ian Yolis asks, Wade, given the magnitude of the climate crisis we face and the dominant cultural construct that you've referenced, are you optimistic about our future?
Totally optimistic.
If so, why?
Totally optimistic, because pessimism is indulgence, despair and insult to the imagination, orthodoxy the enemy of invention. We have to tell our kids to do what's necessary and then ask whether it was possible or permissible. The main thing I say to young people, I quote Jim Whittaker, the first American to climb Everest: if you're not living on the edge when you're young, you're taking up too much space. Do what needs to be done. Put yourself in the way of opportunity, so there's no choice but success. I'm totally optimistic. And the one thing we should not be doing in the climate crisis, something that really I think is problematic, is frightening our children. The weed will win in the end. The world will endure. The notion that the climate situation, complicated as it is, it implies the obliteration of life itself, the end of civilization, is simply a kind of indulgence celebrated by those who have an almost pornographic obsession with the coming apocalypse. Climate change is happening. It's anthropogenic. We have to deal with it. We have to reduce carbon emissions. We also have to mitigate. But the world is not coming to an end. And there's nothing that saddens me more than data that suggests that young people of my children's generation are afraid to have children because they think the world is coming to an end. This is the most grotesque thing that an adult can do to a young person. It's like, the whole thing, the world used to be good. It's bad now. But the truth is, all that is expressing is a failure of the elder to understand the world coming at them from below. What is life but a story we lose the power of comprehending as we get old? The grace of age is to get off the stage and to stop complaining and stop whining, and above all, never lay on the young the burdens of your own generation, the consequences of your own actions. Our kids will work it out. We may have made a mess of things, and we made a mess of things. They did not make a mess of things. And don't tell a young person that the world is coming to an end. Nothing could be crueler or more wrong or more indulgent. Believe me, the world will endure. The planet will survive. We will find a way. And that's the whole point. The dream is there. And to deny that dream to young people, in a kind of indulgent flurry of obsession with your own mortality. So much of this, for my generation, is about our own imminent sense of mortality. It fuses with an apocalyptic vision of the coming years, because all of us at my age are seeing people die left and right. But we mask it in some kind of crusade of goodness and moral superiority. But what we're really doing is denying our children the chance to dream, to see a future that may be complicated. What future has never been complicated? It's like, what graduating class has ever graduated into a world at peace? But no, we should shut up and let the kids get on with it.
Wade, thank you so much. Thank you for your not only optimism about youth and the future, but your love for those youth and your love for the earth and your love for what the future will be. And on that, tremendously potent note, I want to turn it over back to Meg and thank you for your participation in what I'm sure every participant will, every attendee will remember for a long time.
Thanks, Vera, very much for being with me and being such a wonderful facilitator and colleague.
This is really special.
Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Wade. Thank you, Vera.